Before we leave the topic of production, let's look lastly at emerging technology in production. So when we talk about emerging technologies in management and how we make our goods and provide our services, we've already talked in a previous video about robotics, right? Using machines in production to automate part of that process. Well, there are other emerging technologies we can look at: artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, which is both the virtual reality and augmented reality, and the Internet of Things. And what we are hearing when it comes to emerging technology is that managers need to be aware of what's out there in terms of emerging technology. So they need to stay up to date as to what technology is coming about, as well as how they might be able to integrate it into their production process. So this can be everything from cloud computing to wearables, using blockchain and cryptocurrency. And so the role of the manager really is to look at how that technology can impact operational effectiveness and competitive advantage. More and more, there'll be pressure on managers to adopt these technologies to stay ahead. So let's take a look at some of these technologies. So first we'll talk about AI and machine learning. So when you have machine learning, we have our computer is developing algorithms, formulas, often to classify things. So here we have an example of a flying fruit picker, and what it is doing is using machine learning to identify whether the fruit is ripe. So it is looking at an image as it flies past these trees. Is the fruit the right color, the right shape? And so when we do machine learning, we have if we're training, rather than reinforced learning where it learns itself, it trains itself. But if we are training our computer, then we'll have a set of training data which says this is what a ripe fruit looks like. This is what non-ripe fruit looks like. And so it creates its own algorithm or formula to then identify for itself what it means, what it looks like when fruit is ripe. Reinforced learning is a bit different. That is where machine is learning from itself in terms of correcting its algorithm to identify the classification on its own without having that training data and then our testing data to create the algorithm to start with. So here we have machine learning to identify the fruit being ripe. And then we have our robotics. We have our flying fruit picker. So it's flying around to identify the ripe fruit and then to pull it off the trees. So check out this video. I have it linked here, and you can see it in action. When we talk about emerging technology, we can also look at wearables. So these are equipment that we can put on that often will use those machine learning and algorithms that we'll talk to through cloud computing, talk to the web in terms of connecting with and providing information. So for example, if we look at manufacturing during COVID, the big concern was that we would have disruption to production when it came to essential manufacturing like food. And so we need the plant that is processing meat, for example, poultry, beef. We need people not to get sick. So one way we can reduce that likelihood is if we can keep people apart. And so what we saw during COVID is that people have wearables. You might have something that's on your body that will detect how far you are away from someone else who's wearing a similar device, and keep track and warn you if you are too close. So, right, we're keeping our 6 feet distance apart. And so this is helping us in terms of that process to reduce the spread of COVID. We can also see wearables in things like delivery. So if you're looking at, whether you're looking at DHL, FedEx, UPS, often you would have to sign for packages when they arrive. Well, now the delivery people will wear items or have components with them that tracks exactly where they are in terms of GPS. And so it knows what time you are at that person's house to drop the package. And so then that is used as confirmation for the drop off as opposed to signatures. We can also see wearables used by doctors. So you might have a patch that you might wear that will then communicate with your smartphone, which sends information to your doctor in terms of how you're doing. So we can have, they see on the picture, these microneedle patches that monitor glucose. We have smartwatches that are monitoring heart rate, oxygen levels. And so those can then be communicating to your doctor in terms of how well you are doing. So we're looking at emergency technology in terms of how we make our goods or provide our services. So I want you to start thinking about what's the role of these emerging technologies. What could they be in terms of producing goods or services? So what could we use? What other things could we use wearables for? What else could we use virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality for? So mixed reality being a combination of virtual reality and mixed. When we talk about virtual reality, so let's just be clear here in our definitions. So in virtual reality, we're essentially creating a fake world. So if you think about virtual reality gaming, right, you put on your mask and you see a whole new world around you. My favorite virtual reality game is where I am working at a cash register and I'm checking out the products. And at the same time, these giant fruit are attacking me. So I have to shoot the giant banana and giant cherry as they attack. And the goal is to get all of the items, whether it's a hair dryer or whatever it is, checked out from the cash register. So it's a whole imaginary world around you. Whereas augmented reality is where we enhance the real world. So from a gaming perspective, we can think of augmented reality in terms of playing Pokemon Go, right? So you can see the Pokemon overlaid on top of what is an image of the real world. So we're enhancing the real world. And then we have mixed reality, which is a combination of AR and VR. So the question is, how could we use these in making our goods or providing our services? So let's just take a look at some examples. So there's a video here I'll link to, and it goes through some different types of virtual reality and augmented reality. So I encourage you to check that out. One thing you'll see in this video, if you look, for example, about, I guess what it's about, a minute and 46 into this video, what you will see is that you will see that we have companies like IKEA, for example, where you want to see if the furniture will fit into your house. And so you can take a picture or video of your living room and it overlays the couch into your room. So what would this be? Would this be virtual reality or augmented reality? So this is, of course, augmented reality since you're seeing your own house, but we're adding in that virtual furniture. About just under 5 minutes in, you'll see an example of virtual reality. We see that in terms of training, in terms of medical planning for surgeries. We can have doctors go through the process, practice the medical procedure in that virtual world. So that's an example of virtual reality. Towards the end of this video, about 10.5 minutes in or so, you can see an example of mixed reality. So maybe this will be the future of management meetings where your avatar, your hologram, attends a meeting and sits around a big table with everyone else from work. So we're mixing virtual reality and augmented reality. You're not actually at that meeting. You're at home. but you overlay both your hologram and that virtual reality environment. So we can see that where we're progressing in terms of management is a whole new world in terms of technology. Some examples in terms of manufacturing, in terms of some of the process production of goods. Here we have virtual reality with Kraft Heinz. So Kraft Heinz is trying to solve its supply chain issues. They're manufacturing ketchup. And so what they've done is they've created a virtual version of their manufacturing plant. This allows them to watch the production process. It allows them to play with how the production is done, tweak it, and see what happens in terms of, does it improve productivity? Does it increase the output of their ketchup bottles? So we're creating that virtual world with our mock-up of the manufacturing plant, and that allows us to tinker and play with the process without the big investments that come with changing a manufacturing plant or building a new manufacturing plant. So lots of simulations can happen in that virtual reality realm. The other thing we want to look at when it comes to production is the idea of the Internet of Things. So this is that you have things, particularly machines, equipment, where we equip with sensors that will then talk to the internet. So we have then somewhere our servers, our cloud computing that connects to all of our devices. So the benefit of having the Internet of Things is that we can actually have visibility at remote or outsourced operations. So we can know what's happening in our production process if our production process needs to happen somewhere where people can't be. So let's suppose that we are doing our work in terms of deep water. So maybe we do deep ocean drilling. Well, it's very expensive. It's hard to get people down to the ocean floor. So the robots that we're having do some of that work all have sensors on them and are reporting back to the ship above or our platform in terms of how well the equipment is operating, how much we are pulling out in terms of that production. So our equipment is talking to us through those sensors. We can also create visibility into the manufacturing supply chain, so we can track the movement of our supplies. So we have another company who makes something for us that then goes into our production. So we are making trucks. Another company is going to make our tires, and then we can actually track the, if we're moving it by truck, we can track the movement of those vehicles carrying all those tires to our location so we can see what's happening. We can also get visibility into the shop floor and the field operations. So if we think about a manufacturing plant where we're making that truck, we can have the equipment that's doing and helping with the assembly actually tell us how well it's performing. Does it need maintenance? How many items is it able to process in a given time? And so this helps us to plan and improve the operations, helps us to know when we need to schedule some downtime for maintenance. And so it can help streamline our production. In fact, the benefit of Internet of Things is cost reduction. So we then can look at what is the most efficient way to do something, when do we need to schedule that maintenance. We can shorten the time to market. Okay. More efficient supply chain operations as we track the movement of goods. We have our equipment talk to each other so we know when items need to be brought in. It also allows for improved safety in our production process, less likely to have injury if we don't have to have people down in those unsafe conditions. Instead, the robots can talk to us instead, as well as when we're monitoring the production floor and our equipment, there's less likely to be issues where, let's say, people's clothing get caught in machines. The machines are monitoring the progress, and so we don't have to be as deeply involved, and they can do a lot of the assessments themselves rather than having to have someone right on top of them. It also allows for mass customization. So where we're moving to in manufacturing is we really want to keep that large quantity and the benefit we get from producing a large quantity, that idea of economies of scale. So remember, economies of scale is when we produce a greater quantity, we can take our cost per unit and make that cost per unit go down by spreading out the big cost of machines and the facilities and so on. So we want to maintain that economies of scale by having large production, but we know that customers all want something a little bit different. So we want to move to mass customization, which allows for variety at the same time there's large quantity. And so if you have the Internet of Things, then you're talking with all of your equipment. And of course, then that allows for that computer integrated manufacturing that we talked about in a previous video. So why do we need to pay attention to what's happening in terms of emerging technology? Well, that is where management is going. And according to General Electric CEO, Jeff Immelt, if you're joining the company in your 20s, you're going to need to learn how to code. So machine learning is the future when it comes to lots of jobs, lots of disciplines. And so in fact, if you continue on to your 4th year in our BBA, we have a course in business intelligence and analytics where we look specifically at machine learning in various different business disciplines. So for example, if you're working in human resources, then we are often using AI machine learning now to do the screening of applicants. So when you submit your resume, you upload it to a company's website. It is a computer that is doing natural language processing. It's looking at your text to identify if you should be shortlisted. We're also seeing more and more candidates having to do recorded interviews, and then facial recognition and that natural language processing is assessing how well you would fit with the organization. We also have performance monitoring using machine learning as well, and analysis of surveys and other types of retention analytics. So if you go into human resources, knowing how to code and knowing machine learning is going to become very important. If you're in accounting, data visualization is becoming more and more important, storytelling with data. And what we find with the CPA is that learning how to code and understanding the language of machines is actually being added to our CPA skills list. If you're in financial services, then machine learning is being used to identify issues of fraud. So how do we know when it comes to like your credit card, whether it's you buying something or whether that's something out of characteristic for you, indicating that it's somebody else. And so this is machine learning that's doing this. We also have machine learning identifying whether or not you should be approved for additional credit. And then we, of course, have things like chatbots that provide customer service. So you're talking to a machine when you're asking for help or assistance, and it is doing triage to determine if it can resolve your issue before it sends you to a person to talk to. So we're seeing the role of those emerging technologies throughout the business industries. We also have in marketing, neuromarketing. We're looking at behavior. We're looking for patterns. And so we're looking at behavior analytics. We're also doing web scraping to gather information from people who visits our website, and how long do they stay? What are they focused on? What are people saying on Twitter in terms of our organization? So we're pulling information from the web in terms of web scraping, or we are tracking behavior on the internet as well. A lot of the jobs in terms of the entrepreneurs that you'll create will be in terms of these emerging technologies. We're seeing more and more in terms of phygital distribution models. So that's both the physical and the digital. We used to have what we call e-commerce, right? So you might sell some products online, and now we have this wholesale integration of your physical location and your online presence being integrated into the company. So we're moving really into a world of machine learning and emerging tech, regardless of what discipline of business you go into. And so because of that, in this course, we're going through these different emerging technologies. But as well, if you continue on in our program, you'll find that in a number of courses, you'll have opportunities to practice coding. And of course, in that fourth year course, you will have the opportunity to look at and play with machine learning for human resources, for accounting, for financial services, marketing, and entrepreneurship.